It turns out the Long Island iced tea was not the most bitter thing at my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. That honor belonged to the moment my golden child sister stood up, cradled her belly, and gazed at my husband with teary eyes. She thought she was starring in a tragic romance, unaware she had just signed the death warrant for her social life. My husband and I hold a medical secret that makes her pregnancy announcement the greatest farce in family history. My name is Elena. At 32 years old, I am a lead landscape architect at Stratford and Oak, a job that requires me to impose structure and logic upon the unruly natural world. It is a fitting career choice, considering I have spent my entire life trying to manage the chaotic ecosystem of my own family. We were currently standing in the grand foyer of my parents' estate in suburban Connecticut, a place where the local housewives determine your moral standing by the thread count of your linens and the annual cost of your lawn maintenance services. It is a world of manicured hedges and jagged insults wrapped in polite conversation. My sister, Bella, was the undisputed center of this dysfunction. At 24, she was the family's golden child, a title she maintained despite having the work ethic of a sloth and the spending habits of a small nation. She styled herself as an influencer, which essentially meant she lived off our parents' allowance while posting melodramatic captions about her struggles to an audience of bots. My parents enabled her every whim. In their eyes, Bella was a fragile flower who needed protection, while I was the unfeeling cactus who could survive without water. If Bella made a mistake, it was a tragedy. If I pointed it out, I was a bully. My husband, Mark, stood beside me, his hand resting reassuringly on the small of my back. Mark is a calm, brilliant orthopedic surgeon who spends his days reconstructing shattered limbs. Despite his success, my parents treated him with a polite disdain. To them, he was merely middle-class effort, a man who had to work for his money rather than inheriting it from a grandfather who exploited the railroad system. They tolerated him because he was useful for medical advice, but they never truly accepted him. The occasion was my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. The room was suffocatingly hot, filled with the scent of expensive lilies and the drone of shallow chatter. I watched my mother accept a diamond bracelet from my father, her smile as fixed and artificial as the floral arrangements. I give it 20 minutes before someone asks me about my salary. Mark whispered in my ear, his voice low. I would kill to be home right now. Just sweatpants and that documentary on fungi. Hold on, I whispered back, squeezing his hand. Show face, eat one canapé, and we retreat. Just then, the heavy double doors swung open. Bella had arrived. She was 45 minutes late, and she had clearly dressed to ensure no one missed her entry. She wore a slip dress of pale, clinging silk that looked as though it had been painted on. It was scandalously tight, specifically around her midsection, where the fabric strained against a small but undeniable curve. The room fell silent. My mother gasped softly. Bella walked through the crowd with the confidence of a woman who knows she is the protagonist of everyone's story. She stopped in front of us, her eyes glassy and wet. She did not look at me. She looked directly at Mark. It was a lingering, uncomfortable gaze that made the hair on my arms stand up. True love is such a tragedy when it is forbidden, Bella murmured, her voice thick with emotion. She looked at Mark with a pitiful longing that made no sense. Mark frowned, shifting his weight. Are you okay? Bella. She ignored his question and turned toward the center of the room. She raised a crystal champagne flute and tapped it sharply with a silver spoon. The sound cut through the murmurs of the crowd. Everyone, Bella called out, her voice trembling. Please. I need everyone's attention. She placed a hand protectively over the bump in her silk dress, tears streaming down her face in a perfect, cinematic flow. I have a very important announcement to make, she said, her voice catching in her throat. And I cannot keep this secret anymore. I am 3 months pregnant, Bella announced, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility that would have made a Broadway actress envious. She paused, letting the sob catch in her throat just long enough to ensure every eye in the room was fixed on her tear-streaked face. Then she raised a finger and pointed it accusingly, tragically, directly at my husband, and the father is Mark. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that usually precedes a bomb blast. For a heartbeat. The only sound was the hum of the expensive air conditioning system trying to filter out the sudden toxicity in the room. Bella did not stop there. She launched into her narrative, a sordid little tale she had clearly rehearsed in front of her vanity mirror. It happened that night 3 months ago, she stammered, clutching her stomach as if in pain. When Mark came over to help me fix the leak in my bathroom. We had some wine, and I was so lonely, and he was there. And, oh God, I feel so used beside me. Mark went rigid. His hand, which had been holding a silver dessert fork, went slack. The fork hit his porcelain plate with a sharp, jarring clatter that echoed like a gunshot. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. It was not the face of a guilty man caught in a lie. It was the face of a man watching a car crash in slow motion, paralyzed by the sheer horror of the fabrication. What Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. "Bella, what are you?" He never finished the sentence. My mother moved across the room with a speed I did not know she possessed. She did not ask for an explanation. She did not look at me. She marched straight up to Mark and swung her arm. The slap was loud, wet, and vicious. It left a bright red handprint blooming instantly on Mark's cheek. "You animal!" my mother shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "You predatory filth! In my house, with my daughter." The room erupted. The silence broke into a cacophony of gasps and malicious whispers. I could feel the eyes of the neighbors boring into us. Mrs. Higgins, who had always hated that I became an architect instead of a trophy wife, looked positively delighted. I saw the smirk she tried to hide behind her champagne flute. They were eating this up. The downfall of the successful, stable older sister and her respectable husband was the best entertainment they had seen in years. Bella sank to her knees on the Persian rug, weeping loudly now. I did not want to say anything she wailed, looking up at my father with wide, pleading eyes. I wanted to protect Elena. I did not want to ruin her marriage. But I could not keep it a secret anymore. "The baby deserves a father. I was not even there," Mark shouted, finally finding his voice over the din. He looked desperate, his eyes darting around the hostile room. "I have not been to Bella's apartment in over 6 months. That story is insane. I never fixed her plumbing." "Shut your mouth," my father roared. His face was a deep, dangerous purple. He stepped between Mark and Bella, shielding her like she was a wounded saint. "Do not you dare call my daughter a liar after what you did to her." I stood there, frozen. It was a strange sensation. I felt as though I had detached from my physical body and was floating near the crystal chandelier. Looking down at this grotesque tableau, I watched my husband, the most honest man I knew, being cornered like a rat. I watched my parents, who had never once taken my side in 3 decades, instantly villainize him without a shred of evidence. It was fascinating in a morbid, heartbreaking way. My father turned his fury on me. "Elena, get him out of here," he commanded, pointing a shaking finger at the door. "You need to call a lawyer tomorrow. You are divorcing him. He has to take responsibility for what he did to your sister. We have to protect the family honor." Honor. I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. "Do it. Elena," my mother screamed, cradling a sobbing Bella. "Look at what he did to her." I looked at Mark. He was trembling, his cheeks still burning red, his eyes wide with a plea for me to believe him. He looked broken. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers were ice cold. I squeezed them hard, grounding us both. If he leaves, I leave, I said, my voice steady and cold, cutting through the hysteria. If you walk out that door with him, my father threatened, his voice dropping to a low growl. Do not bother coming back. Do not worry, I said, looking at the three of them, the weeping liar, the enabler, and the tyrant. We won't. I pulled Mark toward the exit, walking past the gawking guests who parted like the Red Sea, leaving the ruins of the party and my family behind us. The drive home was a blur of passing streetlights and suffocating silence. Mark gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white, his entire body vibrating with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. I did not turn on the radio. There was no song in the world that could soundtrack the absurdity of what had just happened. When we finally walked through the front door of our townhouse, the dam broke. Mark tossed his keys onto the console table and collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. They are going to destroy me. Elena, Mark said, his voice muffled and shaking. Your father. He knows everyone on the hospital board. If this rumor gets out, if people actually believe I slept with my sister-in-law, my career is over. I spent 15 years building my reputation, and Bella just torched it in 5 minutes. He looked up at me, his eyes red and wild with panic. I did not do it. Elena, you believe me? Right. Please tell me you believe me. I walked over to the kitchen island, poured a glass of ice water, and carried it to him. I sat down on the coffee table directly in front of him, bringing our faces level. I was not panicking. In fact, a cold, sharp clarity had settled over me. Drink this, I said softly. He took a sip, his hands trembling. Mark, I said, my voice steady. I know you did not do it. I know it with 100% certainty. How can you be so calm, he asked, choking on a sob. She is 3 months pregnant. She said it was me. Everyone saw her. I am calm because Bella made a critical error in her script. I replied, taking his hand. Think. Mark. Think back to 4 years ago, November of 2021. Mark blinked, confusion clouding his features. The trauma of the evening had scrambled his brain, making him forget the most obvious defense he had. November, he muttered. I do not. The fertility clinic. I prompted him. Dr. Henderson. The procedure we agreed upon because we wanted to focus on our careers and travel rather than changing diapers. Mark's eyes widened. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He dropped the glass back onto the table. The vasectomy, he whispered. Oh my God. I had a vasectomy. Exactly. I nodded. A successful one? You are sterile. Mark. You have been sterile for 4 years. We never told my parents because we knew they would disown us for cutting off their precious bloodline. But the medical records exist. Mark let out a long, ragged breath, slumped back against the cushions. A hysterical laugh bubbled up from his chest. I cannot believe I forgot, he said, running a hand through his hair. I was so terrified that I forgot I literally cannot make a baby. There is more, I added, pulling out my phone. Bella said the conception happened 3 months ago. Specifically, the night of the big storm when she claimed you came over to fix her leak. Do you remember where you were 3 months ago on the 12th? Mark frowned, his mind racing. Then, a smile, a genuine, vicious smile, crept onto his face. Boston, he said. I was at the Northeast Spinal Surgery Symposium. I was presenting a paper on lumbar reconstruction. And I was with you, I confirmed. We have flight records. We have hotel receipts from the Marriott. We have photos of us eating clam chowder at Quincy Market at the exact time Bella claims you were in her bed. This isn't just a lie, Mark said, his voice hardening as the fear replaced itself with fury. This is a setup. She planned this. She knew the timeline was vague enough that people would not check immediately. He stood up, pacing the room with renewed energy. I am calling my lawyer. We are releasing my medical records tomorrow morning. We are going to post the flight tickets on Facebook. I am going to end this right now. No, I said sharply. Mark stopped and looked at me. What? Why, Elena? She is destroying our lives. If we release the proof now, Bella will just cry and say she was confused. I explained, standing up to meet him. She will say she slept with someone else and just thought it was you because she has been so stressed. Mom and Dad will forgive her. They will say it was an honest mistake. They will sweep it under the rug, and next month she will do something else to hurt us. I stepped closer, placing my hands on his shoulders. I do not want an apology. Mark, I want a funeral for her lies. I want her to dig this hole so deep that she can never climb out of it. I want Mom and Dad to defend her, to put their names and reputations on the line for her lie, so that when the truth comes out, they go down with her. Mark looked at me, searching my eyes. He saw the fire there, 30 years of being the scapegoat, of being second best, of swallowing insults. What do you want to do? He asked softly. We play the part, I whispered. You act guilty and confused. You act like maybe, just maybe, you blackened out and made a mistake. I will act heartbroken. I will act like I am considering leaving you. We let them think they have won. We let them demand money. We let them demand the house. And we document every single thing. Mark took a deep breath. He looked at the handprint on his cheek, then back at me. Okay, he said, interlacing his fingers with mine. Let's burn it all down. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My mother did not call to check if her eldest daughter was surviving the implosion of her marriage. Instead, she called to negotiate the terms of my surrender. Her voice over the phone was not shrill, but terrifyingly practical, as if we were discussing a catering menu rather than the destruction of my life. You have a duty. Elena, she lectured me on Tuesday morning while I stared blankly at a spreadsheet. That baby is your blood. It is the first grandchild. Since Mark has clearly lost his mind, you need to step up. We expect you to cover Bella's prenatal yoga and her organic meal delivery service. It is the least you can do. Meanwhile, Bella was busy curating her narrative online. She posted black and white photos of herself looking out windows with captions like, "Betrayal cuts deep, but a mother's love is stronger, and silence is the price of peace. But I am done being quiet." She never named Mark directly, but she didn't have to. The local rumor mill did the work for her. The fallout was swift. At Stratford and Oak, colleagues who used to stop by my desk for coffee now walked past with their eyes glued to the floor. Mark had it worse. On Wednesday, he came home pale and silent. An anonymous letter had been sent to the hospital ethics board, claiming he was predatory toward vulnerable women. We knew exactly who wrote it. The handwriting on the envelope matched my mother's jagged cursive perfectly. Then came the final blow. On Thursday afternoon, my father marched into my glass-walled office, bypassing my receptionist entirely. He did not sit down. He stood over my desk, casting a long shadow over my blueprints. I am done playing games. Elena, he said, his voice low and threatening. I want you to file for divorce by the end of the week, and since Mark is the one who caused this mess, it is only fair that he moves out and Bella moves into your townhouse. She needs stability for the pregnancy. You want me to give Bella my house, I stammered, widening my eyes and forcing my voice to break. I reached into my blazer pocket and discreetly tapped the record button on my phone. It is Mark's house, too. Is it not? My father sneered. Consider it child support. If you do not do this, Elena, I am cutting you out of the will, the lake house, the trust fund, everything. You will not see a dime. Please. Dad, that is not fair, I whimpered, squeezing out a few crocodile tears. I worked so hard for this. Then do what is right for your sister. he barked, slamming his hand on my desk before storming out. I waited until he was in the elevator before I wiped my eyes and saved the recording. It was a beautiful, crystal-clear confession of extortion. That evening, the financial demands escalated. Bella texted Mark directly. She did not ask for an apology or emotional support. She asked for $50,000. She called it a silence fee to keep her from going to the press with her story, plus expenses for a delivery at a private suite in Cedars-Sinai. "She is insane," Mark said, staring at the screen. $50,000. "Does she think I print money in the operating room?" "Send her $2,000, I instructed, reading over his shoulder. "Label the transfer medical assistance. Do not admit to being the father. Just send enough to prove she is accepting money from us." We soon found out why she was so desperate. A quick background check revealed that my golden sister was drowning. She had racked up over $40,000 in credit card debt and had a serious problem with online blackjack. The baby was not a miracle. It was a bailout strategy. Then, Bella played her boldest card yet. She called me, sobbing, claiming her landlord was kicking her out because of the stress. She asked to move in with us. "It makes sense. Elena," she whined. "Mark is, well, he is the father. He should be around to help me if I have morning sickness. Mom thinks it is a great idea for us to heal as a family." It was the most twisted, delusional request I had ever heard. She wanted to live with the man she falsely accused and the sister she was betraying. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling with feigned resignation. "You can come, just for 1 week, until you find a new place." I hung up and looked at Mark. He looked nauseous. "1 week," I told him, my eyes hard. "Keep your enemies closer. Right if she is in our house, on our Wi-Fi, using our devices. She is going to slip up. And when she does, we will be there to catch it." Bella moved into our home with the humility of a conquering warlord claiming new territory. She commandeered the guest bedroom with the ensuite bath, filling the space with her clutter within 2 hours of arrival. She treated me not as her sister or her host, but as an inconvenienced maid service. "Elena, be a dear and fetch me another pillow," she commanded from the sofa, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "My back it is just killing me." I fetched the pillow. I fluffed it. I smiled. But while I played the role of the submissive, guilt-ridden sister, my eyes were recording everything. The first crack in her performance appeared at dinner. Bella demanded sushi. When the delivery arrived, she devoured 3 spicy tuna rolls without hesitation. I watched her chopsticks dive into the raw fish. "I thought pregnant women were supposed to avoid raw fish," I noted casually, pouring myself a glass of water. Bella froze, a piece of tuna hovering halfway to her mouth. "Oh, well," she stammered, her eyes darting to the side. "My doctor said, he said a little bit of protein is good for the baby, just in moderation." Later that night, I noticed she was carrying around a reusable water bottle that she refused to let out of her sight. When she left it on the coffee table to go to the bathroom, I unscrewed the cap and took a sniff. It was not water. It was Pinot Grigio, heavily diluted with ice to mask the smell, but unmistakable. She was drinking alcohol while allegedly carrying the child she was extorting us for. Once the house was quiet and Bella was snoring in the guest room, Mark and I began our real work. We went into the garage where I had moved the bathroom trash bag before taking it to the curb. "This is humiliating," Mark whispered, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. "It is necessary," I replied, shining a flashlight into the bag. We sifted through makeup wipes and tissues until Mark found it, a crumpled, wet receipt. He smoothed it out on the hood of his car. "Look at the date," he said, pointing to the faded ink. September 12th, the night of the storm, the night I was supposedly forcing myself on her in her apartment. The receipt was from the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar on the bad side of town. The timestamp was 11:45 at night. It showed a purchase of 4 tequila shots and 2 beers. She was not home crying in despair, I said, photographing the receipt. She was doing shots at midnight. The next day, the report from the private investigator arrived in my secure email. I had hired a man named Mr. Vance, a former cop who charged $300 an hour and asked 0 questions. The attachment contained a series of high-resolution photos taken over the last few weeks. They showed Bella. She was not alone, and she certainly did not look like a grieving victim. In the photos, she was wrapped around a man in the parking lot of a gym. He was tall, muscular, and covered in tattoos, with a shaved head and a look that screamed trouble. Mark looked over my shoulder at the screen. "Who is that?" "Meet the real father," I said. We tried to get medical confirmation. Mark approached Bella the next morning with a referral for a non-invasive prenatal DNA test. "It is just a blood draw." "Bella," Mark explained gently, "it poses 0 risk to the fetus. If we do this, we can clear everything up legally." Bella instantly recoiled, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. "No!" she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of panic. "My doctor said my condition is too fragile. No needles. You just want to hurt the baby because you do not want him." She refused to budge, but her refusal was just another piece of evidence. I decided to get closer to the source. Bella had a habit of leaving her iPad lying around unlocked while she was taking a 2-hour nap. I installed a keystroke logger and a mirroring app on her device. It took 5 minutes. That evening, as I sat in the living room pretending to read a book, my phone buzzed with real-time notifications of her messages. She was chatting with a user named Jax Lift Heavy. "Jax, did you get the money from them yet? Rent is due on the 15th. Bella, chill out. I got $2,000 from Mark. The big payout comes later. My parents are totally buying the sad act." "Jax, you sure Mark won't figure it out? The timeline is tight. Bella Mark is a wimp. He is scared of his own shadow. And Elena. She is too busy trying to save her marriage to notice anything. We are going to be rich, babe." I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach, but I kept reading. Jax was an unemployed personal trainer with a record for petty theft. The final nail in the coffin came when I was folding Bella's laundry part of my penance, and a piece of paper fell out of her jeans pocket. It was an ultrasound slip, but it was not from the luxury private clinic she had billed my parents $3,000 for. It was from a community health center downtown. I compared the image on the slip to the stock photos online. It was real, but the gestational age noted in the corner was different from what she claimed. She was further along than she said. The dates aligned perfectly with Jax, not Mark. I took the slip, the receipt, the printed screenshots of the chat logs, the PI's photos, and Mark's Boston flight records. I bought a thick black binder and began to assemble them. I labeled the first page Project Truth. "Enjoy your nap. Bella," I whispered to the empty hallway, "because when you wake up, your nightmare begins." The invitation arrived on creamy cardstock, embossed with gold lettering that seemed to mock the very reality of our lives. My parents were hosting a gender reveal party. In their twisted logic, the best way to sanitize the scandal of their daughter sleeping with her brother-in-law was to bury it under an avalanche of expensive balloons and hors d'oeuvres. They invited everyone, business partners, neighbors, and extended family, turning a private crisis into a public spectacle intended to coerce Mark into accepting the child before a live audience. I played my part perfectly. I sat in my mother's sunroom, looking small and defeated, holding a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. "I cannot fight anymore, Mom," I whispered, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor. I am just so tired. I will sign the divorce papers. I will announce it at the party so Bella can have her fresh start." My mother sighed, a sound of relief mixed with victory. "Finally, Elena, you are doing the right thing. It is about time you stopped being so selfish and thought about the family image." Bella, sensing blood in the water, decided to twist the knife. She was lounging on the patio, scrolling through her phone. When I walked by, "Hey, Elena," she called out, not bothering to look up. "Since you are leaving Mark and moving into a smaller apartment, you probably won't need the Mercedes anymore." "Right. An SUV is safer for the baby. Consider it." Emotional compensation for the stress you caused me. I dug my fingernails into my palms, forcing a tight, trembling smile. I will think about it, Bella. Just let me get through the party." While I played the victim, Mark was quietly meeting with a top-tier defamation lawyer in the city. He spent the afternoon finalizing a lawsuit that would incinerate my family's finances. He kept the paperwork hidden in his briefcase, a silent grenade waiting for the pin to be pulled. My own investigation had yielded the final piece of the puzzle. I created a fake profile on a social media platform, posing as a tabloid scout looking for dirt. I messaged Jax, the tattoo-covered gym rat I had identified as the real father. I offered him $5,000 for proof of his relationship with Bella, promising him anonymity. Jax, desperate and not particularly bright, took the bait within an hour. He sent a video clip. It was grainy, filmed in a car, but the audio was crystal clear. "He is never going to know." Bella's voice laughed from the speakers of my laptop. "Mark is rich and stupid. He is too nice to question it. And my sister, she is a doormat. We get the child support, and we are set for life." "Babe." I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding not with fear, but with the thrill of the kill. I had it all now. The silver bullet. I had the official medical records of Mark's vasectomy from 4 years ago. I had the flight manifests and hotel receipts placing Mark in Boston during the conception window. And now, I had a video confession of the conspiracy. I spent the rest of the night assembling my weapon. I opened PowerPoint and began creating a slideshow. I titled the file "Sisterhood: A Journey of Love." To anyone looking over my shoulder, it looked like a sentimental montage of baby photos and family memories. But hidden between the slides of our childhood were the documents that would ruin her. Late that night, I walked past the guest room. The door was ajar. Bella was asleep, her face relaxed and youthful in the moonlight. For a split second, I felt a pang of pity. She was my little sister. She was pathetic, broken, and misguided. But then I remembered the smirk on her face when she asked for my car. I remembered the handprint on my husband's face. I remembered the years of gaslighting. I closed the door softly. The time for mercy had passed. Downstairs. Mark was waiting for me in the living room. We had set up a projector to test the connection one last time. "Is the audio synced?" Mark asked, his voice steady. "It is perfect," I replied, plugging in the HDMI cable. The transition from the baby photos to the vasectomy report is seamless. Mark took my hand, squeezing it firmly. We stood in the dark, illuminated only by the blue light of the projector screen. We were no longer victims. We were executioners, waiting for the sun to rise. The garden of my parents' estate had been transformed into a pastel purgatory. Thousands of dollars worth of baby blue and soft pink hydrangeas were arranged in suffocating clusters, and a massive archway of balloons framed the stage where my family's dignity was about to be publicly executed. It was a perfect summer evening, the kind that rich people pay extra for, with the sun dipping below the horizon and casting a golden glow over the 200 guests who had gathered to witness the spectacle. Bella sat on a white velvet loveseat in the center of the lawn, looking like a deity of fertility. She was wearing a floor-length white chiffon gown, a choice so aggressively innocent that it bordered on satire. She rubbed her belly constantly, accepting gifts and fawning compliments from the very same women who had called her a train wreck behind her back just a week ago. My parents stood beside her, beaming with a pride that made my stomach turn. Occasionally, my mother would glance in my direction. Her look was not one of sympathy. It was a look of haughty triumph. In her eyes, I was the failure who could not keep a husband, and I was being rightfully replaced by the younger, more fertile model. They treated me like a broken appliance they were about to drag to the curb. Mark stood near the open bar, nursing a club soda. He looked ragged. His shoulders were slumped, his tie was slightly askew, and he kept his eyes on the ground. To the onlookers, he was a man crushed by guilt and impending divorce. To me, he was delivering an Academy Award-worthy performance. He caught my eye for a fraction of a second and gave a barely perceptible nod. We were ready. I scanned the perimeter of the garden, near the service entrance, half hidden by a large oak tree. I saw him. Jax. He was wearing a cheap suit that was too tight in the shoulders, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the country club crowd. He was clutching the anonymous VIP invitation I had mailed to him, which promised an open bar and a cash raffle. He had no idea he was the main event. At 6 o'clock, my father tapped his microphone, the feedback screeching briefly before silence fell over the lawn. "Thank you all for coming," my father boomed, puffing out his chest. "Today is about new beginnings. It is about family. We have had some challenges recently, but we are a family that forgives. We are embracing this new life, this grandchild, with open arms." He paused for applause, and the crowd dutifully clapped. Then, he turned his gaze toward me. It was a predatory look. "Elena," he said, his voice dripping with faux tenderness. "Come up here, sweetheart. We know this is hard, but it is time to do the right thing. It is time to officially release Mark so he can take responsibility for his new family." The crowd murmured. This was the public humiliation they had all been waiting for. I walked up the steps to the stage. My legs did not shake. My heart did not race. I felt a cold, metallic calm. I took the microphone from my father's hand. I looked out at the sea of faces, the neighbors, the gossips, the fake friends. Then I looked at Bella. She was smiling at me, a smug, victorious little smirk. She thought I was about to concede defeat. She thought she had won the house, the husband, and the money. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice clear and bright. "You are right. Today is a day for the truth. And before I make any legal declarations, I have prepared a little surprise." I gestured to the massive LED screen set up behind the stage. "A video tribute," I continued, widening my smile until it felt sharp enough to cut glass. "To celebrate the bond between sisters and to show everyone exactly how we got here." Bella clapped her hands together, delighted. "Oh, that is actually sweet. Elena." She signaled to the technician, a young man I had bribed with $500 earlier that morning to start the show. The garden lights dimmed. The massive screen flickered to life, illuminating the faces of the crowd in a harsh, electric glow. The air grew heavy and still. The trap was sprung. The screen did not play the acoustic cover of a pop song that Bella had likely envisioned. There was no soft fade-in or sentimental montage. Instead, a stark, high-resolution scan of a medical document appeared, projected 10 feet high for all the neighbors and business elites to see. The header read, "New York Presbyterian Hospital," and right below it, in bold black letters, were the words, "Vasectomy Procedure Record." The date stamped in the corner was November 14th, 2021. A collective gasp swept through the garden like a sudden gust of wind. It was followed immediately by a confused, buzzing murmur. Mark stepped forward, unclipped the microphone from its stand, and his voice boomed across the lawn, calm and deadly. "Medically speaking, I have been unable to father a child since 2021, Mark said, gesturing to the screen behind him. "I have the follow-up test results to prove total sterility. So, I must ask, whose miracle baby is this?" Before the crowd could fully process the information, the slide changed. The screen now displayed a Delta Airlines boarding pass and a hotel invoice from the Boston Marriott. The dates were highlighted in bright red. Next to the documents was a photograph of Mark standing at a podium. pointing at a spinal diagram, with a digital timestamp clearly visible in the corner. On the night Bella claims I was in her apartment fixing a leak and seducing her, Mark continued, his voice dripping with icy vindication. I was 150 miles away, giving a keynote speech on lumbar fusion techniques. Unless I have mastered the art of teleportation, Bella is lying. Turn it off. Bella shrieked. The sound was feral. She leaped from the velvet love seat, knocking over a vase of hydrangeas. Turn it off right now. She is faking it. Those are fake. She lunged toward the technician's table, her hands clawing for the power cables, but she never made it. 2 large security guards, whom I had hired specifically for this moment, stepped in her path. They did not touch her, but their presence was a wall she could not breach. Let the video finish. Bella, I said into my microphone. It gets better. The screen flickered again. This time, it was a video clip. The audio was crisp and loud, blasting through the expensive surround sound speakers my father had rented. It was the footage from the car. Mark is such a loser. He will believe anything. Bella's voice rang out, high and mocking. He is so desperate to be accepted by Dad. And my sister. She is a doormat. We get the child support. I get the house. And we are set for life. Babe. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Then, movement at the back of the garden broke the spell. Jax, the tattooed man from the gym, stood up from his hiding spot near the caterers. He realized the game was up, and he decided to salvage what he could. Hey, Jax shouted, waving his arms. That is me. That is my kid. You promised me a cut of the money. Bella. The chaos that ensued was absolute. My mother, realizing her social standing had just been incinerated, let out a strangled cry and fainted dramatically into the arms of a waiter. My father stood frozen, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. He looked from the screen to Mark, then to the screaming Jax, and finally to his golden child, who was now exposed as a fraud. The shame on his face was not for what they had done to me, but for how they looked to the world. I stood center stage, watching the empire crumble. I felt lighter than I had in years. This is my final gift to you, Bella, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The truth. The guests were no longer politely sipping champagne. They had their phones out. I saw flashes going off. I saw people live streaming the meltdown on Instagram and TikTok. By tomorrow morning, the fall of the Stratford family would be the hottest topic in town. Bella collapsed onto the grass, realizing there was no way out. She did not apologize. She did not show remorse. She pointed a shaking finger at Jax. He made me do it. She screamed, her face ugly with tears and rage. He tricked me and Mom. Mom pushed me. It is not my fault. None of this is my fault. She wailed like a toddler denied a toy. While the world watched and hit the record button, the blue and red lights of the police cruisers flashing against the manicured hedges provided a stark, violent contrast to the pastel party decorations. Mark had called them 20 minutes before the video started playing. As 2 uniformed officers marched through the garden gate, the silence that had fallen over the guests shifted into a murmur of terrified excitement. Isabella Stratford, one of the officers, asked, stepping over a crushed bouquet of hydrangeas. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of extortion and fraud. Bella looked up from the grass, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. She looked like a child who had been told playtime was over forever. No, you cannot arrest me, she wailed, scrambling backward on her hands and knees. My daddy owns this town, Daddy. Tell them to go away. My father stepped forward, his face a mask of panic, reaching for his wallet. But before he could speak, a man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped between him and the police. It was our lawyer, Mr. Hastings. He handed a thick envelope to my father. Mr. Stratford, You and your wife are also being served, Mr. Hastings said, his voice smooth and devoid of pity. My client, Dr. Mark Henderson, is suing you for defamation of character. You knowingly spread false rumors that damaged his professional reputation at the hospital. We have witness statements and the anonymous letter your wife wrote. Jax, realizing the ship was sinking and he was not on the manifest, immediately started shouting. I did not know about the blackmail. Jax yelled, holding his hands up as an officer approached him. She told me we were just getting child support. I did not know she was going to fake the paternity test. She made me do it. You liar, Bella screamed at him, her voice cracking. You said we would be rich. That is enough, I said, stepping forward. I held up the file I had compiled. Officer, this folder contains evidence of the wire transfer Mark sent to her under false pretenses. It also contains her online gambling records. She owes $42,000 to an offshore casino site. That is why she needed the money. That is why she needed the baby to be Mark's. She needed a payout, not a father. My father looked at me, his eyes wide and desperate. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic realization that he had bet on the wrong horse. Elena, please, he hissed, lowering his voice so the neighbors wouldn't hear, though they were all leaning in to listen. We can fix this. I will write a check. How much? $500,000. Just tell the police it was a misunderstanding. Do not let them take your sister in a squad car. Mark stepped up beside me. He looked at my father with a cold, absolute disgust. My reputation is not for sale, Bob, Mark said, and neither is my wife. We will see you in court. We turned our backs on them. We walked out of the garden, past the gaping guests, past the ruin of the gender reveal party, and out the front gate. As we drove away, I did not look back at the house where I had grown up. It was no longer my home. It was just a crime scene. The aftermath was brutal and swift. By Monday morning, the story was front-page news in the local Gazette. Prominent socialite arrested in paternity fraud scandal. The headline was bold, unforgiving, and absolutely delicious. Bella became a pariah overnight. She was kicked out of every social club, banned from the boutiques she used to frequent, and blocked by the very influencers she tried to emulate. My parents did not fare much better. The country club board voted to revoke their membership, citing a violation of the conduct code. Their friends, the ones who valued reputation above all else, stopped returning their calls. They were isolated in their empty mansion, left to rot in the mess they had enabled. I hired a broker and sold my shares in the family trust the same week. I blocked every number associated with the Stratford name. When my mother tried to call me from a burner phone, I changed my number entirely. The legal system was not as lenient as my parents had hoped. Because of the clear evidence of financial fraud and the intent to destroy a doctor's career, the judge wanted to make an example of Bella. She avoided prison time only because she was pregnant, but the sentence was severe. She received 5 years of probation and 300 hours of community service. When the baby was born 6 months later, the court-ordered DNA test confirmed what we already knew: Jax was the father. But Jax, sensing an opportunity to look like the reformed hero, petitioned for full custody, arguing that Bella was mentally unstable and unfit. The judge agreed. Bella was left with nothing: no money, no reputation, no family support, and no child. She was just a lonely woman with a criminal record, living in a studio apartment my father had to rent for her because they had lost the estate. Justice, it turned out, was not blind. It just needed someone to turn on the lights. 2 years later, the rain in Seattle feels different than it did back in Connecticut. It does not feel oppressive or gloomy. It feels like a cleansing wash, scrubbing away the grime of the past to reveal something green and vibrant underneath. Mark and I now live in a glass-walled house overlooking the Puget Sound. It is a home filled with light, silence, and an absolute lack of drama. We are 3,000 miles away from the toxicity that once defined my existence, And the distance has been the best medicine. News still travels. Of course. We heard through a mutual acquaintance that the Stratford estate is gone. My parents were forced to sell the villa at a significant loss to cover the mounting legal fees and the debts incurred from their failing business. It turns out that people in high society do not like to invest their money with a man who publicly tried to defraud his son-in-law. Their reputation was their currency, and they spent it all on a lie. They are now living in a 2-bedroom condo in a less desirable part of town, isolated by their own pride. As for Bella, the last I heard, she is working as a cashier at a 24-hour convenience store. The golden child, who once thought manual labor was beneath her dignity, now scans lottery tickets for strangers. A photo someone sent me showed her looking 10 years older than her 26 years, her face etched with bitterness. She still blames everyone else. In her mind, she is still the victim of a cruel universe, never realizing that she held the match that burned her life down. Yesterday, a letter arrived in the mail. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and smelled faintly of my mother's perfume. There was no return address, but I knew that handwriting. It was shaky, desperate. It was undoubtedly a plea for forgiveness, or perhaps a request for money disguised as an apology. I stood by the fireplace in our living room, the envelope heavy in my hand. For a moment, I considered opening it. I considered letting her words enter my mind one last time. "Do you want to read it?" Mark asked, walking into the room with 2 mugs of tea. I looked at the fire crackling behind the grate. "No," I said softly. "Words are cheap. Mark. And I am done buying what they are selling." I tossed the unopened envelope into the flames. We watched the paper curl and blacken, the ink vanishing into ash. It was a release. Forgiveness is a gift, and I realized I am not obligated to give it to people who are only sorry because they lost. Mark set the tea down and wrapped his arms around me. He has been promoted to chief of surgery at the city's top hospital. His reputation did not just recover, it flourished. People respect him not just for his hands, but for his spine. He stood against a storm and didn't bend. "The adoption agency called," Mark said, resting his chin on my shoulder. "They have a profile they want us to look at." "A little girl," I smiled, turning in his arms. "We decided to start a family on our own terms. We are not doing it to carry on a legacy or to satisfy a grandparent's ego. We are doing it because we have so much love left to give, and we want to share it with a child who needs a home." "Let's look at it tonight," I replied. I sat back down at my drafting table. I am designing a new public park for the city. The centerpiece is a grove of willow trees. They are trees that look fragile, but they survive the harshest storms because they know how to sway without breaking. They are resilient. Mark handed me my mug. We looked at each other, and in that shared silence, there was a profound sense of victory. It was not the loud, screaming victory of the courtroom. It was the quiet, steady victory of peace. I looked out at the gray ocean, thinking about everything we had survived. I used to think family was the most important thing in the world. I was wrong. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. Real family is not defined by whose DNA you share. Family is the people who stand beside you when the rest of the world turns its back. Family is the people who believe you when the lies are loud. And most importantly, family is the people who never need you to take a paternity test to prove your loyalty. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.